welcome to Char K Crafts and Designs. I'm Char, and this is my crafting channel. I wanted to start off with a really simple project, and that is a tiny tree in a jar. It's one of my favorite little crafts to make. I sell it at craft fairs. It's perfect for bookshelves, your desk, and the best part is you never have to remember to water it, so it's really good for those friends and family who always forget. You only need a few basic crochet skills to do this. You need to know how to make a foundation chain and a single crochet. If you're new to crochet and you don't know how to do that, check out my skills video playlist. It covers both of those and a few other kinds as well. You'll need some yarn, some wire, some plastic mesh, and a small jar. Let's get started. Okay, so here are our materials. You'll need a small glass jar with a lid that removes. You'll want it to be able to sit upside down with the lid on the bottom. You'll need some plastic mesh. This comes in larger sheets, and then you'll just cut it down to size. You'll need some fluffier yarn. This is 6 super bulky. You'll need some thinner yarn. This is a 3. You can definitely use some stuff that's even thinner than that. You'll need some brown florist wire. You can also use plain wire. It should just be easily malleable. You'll need a darning needle for sewing in your ends and stitching the treetop. You'll need a smaller crochet hook for your thinner yarn, a larger crochet hook for your fluffier yarn, some scissors, and some wire cutters. You will want to make sure that your crochet hooks are a little bit big for your thin yarn and a little bit small for your fluffy yarn. And that's just so that your stitches are a little tighter when you're kind of doing the grass for the bottom. So I start here with a slip knot, and then you're just gonna do your foundation chain. It should be big enough to go across the mesh that will be in the bottom of your jar. You might have to adjust this if your jar is a little bit bigger. I'm using a spice jar, so it's relatively small. Then you'll basically do a very simple single crochet square to cover the base. So I do my chain 1 to start the next row, and then I single crochet across. If you need a tutorial on how to do single crochets, you can check out that in my skills playlist. I just speed it up here so we can make the base here. You'll want to make sure that it's a little bit of a tighter stitch. You don't want any gaps because this is basically just covering that piece of plastic to create the grass that's going to be in the bottom of our terrarium. One of the nice things about using a fluffy yarn versus something that is just like a regular sort of wool type yarn is it's going to cover your stitches. It creates kind of a mottled effect, but it won't be too clearly defined, which you don't really want for the base. You just kind of want the look of lumpy grass. So there you can see I was just measuring it, making sure it would fit, and then I finish off my square. Your plastic mesh square should be about the size of the base of your jar. It shouldn't fit in easily. You should have to bend it a little bit on the edges. The corners should be a little bit too big to fit through the top, and that will allow you to make sure that with your yarn you're able to press it in and it sits securely within the opening of the jar without falling all the way through. I'm checking it. Oh, wow, it looks perfect. And then I have these long tails. So I'm going to tie them together. And they kind of create a bit of cushion between the plastic mesh and my crocheted part of it. So I'm just going to tie it into a loose little bow, mush up all the strings together, and then, pat, pat, that's a good square. And then I grab my next yarn, which will be the thinner stuff. You can also use regular string for this part. We're just going to be attaching the plastic to our crocheted grass. So I use the same green, just the thinner stuff. Don't use the fluffy yarn. It's really hard to sew through the plastic mesh with a thicker yarn, so use something a little thinner. Usually your treetop will work. If it is also green, if you've chosen a different color for the top, then you would want to use a thinner green yarn for the bottom. So I'm just gonna tie this here. I've threaded it on a needle. It's a double strand, just a regular sewer knot at the bottom. I'm struggling a little bit here, but it's fine. And then we get started. So I'm just placing it back together there, and then I'm sewing. So I start on the inside part, and that's just so that the knot is kind of sandwiched in between the yarn and the mesh. And then I'm just going to stitch through some of the loops on the edge there, pull it tight, and then stitch through the bottom. And your main purpose here is to make sure that your edges are covered. You don't want any of the plastic sticking out on the side, so you just want to stitch it nice and secure, and make sure the edges are kind of tidy. You don't want too much of it overhanging the edge because this does need to fit into the base of the jar. And we just keep stitching around. And we're almost there. Wonderful. So when we finish this off, look at that, it looks so nice. We're just going to put the needle onto the back side, and here I am, I'm just adjusting it because it's going to be kind of rounded when it goes into the base of the jar. So I'm just going to take the needle to the back side of it and then leave it. Don't cut it off yet. We're going to use it later to attach the tree, which is what we're going to make now. So the easiest way to make the tree is make sure that you make a loop, and it can be a little bit larger than the height of your jar. We're going to be folding it in half. This is just a good way to measure the size, make sure the proportions work. So you're going to do loops of wire, and you're just going to go across. You want about 2 loops on either end, 2 complete loops. That gives you 4 branches. Then you're going to snip it off when you're done. Take the excess away, and so now I have my loops of wire, 2 full loops on either side, and then we're going to fold it in half, and that's going to be the actual height of our tree. So if you need to make any adjustments, if you've measured wrong, you can double check it on the glass, make sure it's going to work, and then you just twist it together. So you twist all of the loops together and then leave sort of 2 bunny ears on top, and those are going to be our branches. So then we split them and we twist 2 together like this, going across, twist 2 together, and then we separate them again. I have a little piece of wire here from where I snipped it before, so I'm just kind of adjusting that, twisting them together. So I have 2 small loops, and then I'm going to cut off that edge there. You should make sure that your loops at the end of your tree branches are big enough for your needle to fit through, the darning needle, and you should end up with 4 little branches like that. And then to get the tree trunk at the bottom, you just split them so you have a nice sort of wide base there to stitch into the grass. And that's what your tree should look like. This is just a glamour shot, so if you can reference your own, see if it works. So now we're going to stitch it into the bottom here. So you're going to take your 2 sort of trunk loops at the bottom, press them into the center, get your tree lined up where you want it. This is why we left the string on the bottom. So then we're going to come up through, and we're going to make sure that we go through one of the loops of the tree. We want it to be really secure so that you can basically pull on the tree and it's going to stay attached to the base. This is in case when you go to put it into the glass jar, if it pops all the way through, you'll be able to pull it and you won't damage the tree. It should be really securely looped into the base of the plastic. So it might take a little bit of fiddling. You can see me kind of struggling, and that's just because of the layers of yarn and string that are in there. So you just kind of got to wiggle it around so it goes through. But loop it in on both sides, using both sides of the tree trunk there so that it's nice and secure, looping through into the grass, through the plastic on the bottom. And as you can see, it takes a little bit of wiggling sometimes with all the layers of yarn. And then once you get to the bottom, then you can just knot it by looping through your own stitches. So I just went through one of my own stitches there and then looping it up through to tie a knot. Pull it really tight, and then do one more just for good measure. Like I said, you want it to be really secure. And once that's done, then you can trim it off. You don't need to leave too long of a tail, but leave enough that that knot won't come undone. There we go. And then there's your tree on the grass. And next we're going to be doing the tree top. So you'll do a slip knot, and then you'll do a chain, and you will do a very long chain, and you will chain forever. Not forever, but for a while. It will be longer than you think it will because we're going to twist it up. So it takes quite a few chains. I'm just showing it here. You wrap it around, pull it through. That's how you chain. It's really simple. There is a skills video if you need sort of a refresher that goes through more details. but we will just chain forever. One of the things that you want to do with this yarn, it's going to be a thinner one, but you do want to use a crochet hook that's probably a little bit bigger than you're used to. It's probably bigger than it calls for on the label. And that's just so that your chain ends up really loopy. You don't want your tension too tight, and that's to sort of create the loops of the leaves. And here I'm just testing it by basically looping it back on itself, twisting it around, and I can see, oh, I'm about half done. So I definitely need to do more chains. That's not enough to fill out sort of a fluffy treetop. So I'm gonna keep doing more chains. Like I said, probably more than you think. And if it ends up too long, you can always undo some if you end up with too much, or you can just have a really leafy tree. There's nothing wrong with that. Every tree is different. Whatever you think will work for your glass jar. Maybe you have a shorter tree but a really tall glass jar. You might want a fluffy leafy top, and there's nothing wrong with that. So here we go, some more chaining. And that looks like it's probably done. It's pretty long. And so I am just taking the two ends together and then just twisting it there so that they're looped together like that. And then putting the ends together again. So I basically have 4 layers, and then just looping it and looping it back on itself again and again to create sort of a loopy tree top. And I'm just placing it there to see, is that size right? Do I like it? And it looks pretty good. So I'm going to finish off my chain, just pulling a bigger loop and then cutting it and then pulling that through. So I will have 2 long tails on the end of my chain, and that is exactly what I want. Do not cut them too short. Leave the tails really long. So now I'm going to tie the 2 ends together using my tails. And just a basic granny knot works for this. So you can see I'm just tying it, keeping the ends really close together. There we go. And then I'm going to loop it back on itself again. So just twisting the ends, twisting it around, and then taking those ends and putting them together again. Kind of like folding a towel a little bit without the twisting in the middle. Twisting it back on itself again. So there's lots of loops. You can see how it all twists around one another. And then I'm going to put the ends together again and kind of twist it a little bit more so that I like how it looks. Again, whatever you prefer. If you want it really twisty, if you want it a little loopier, it's up to you. I'm just readjusting it here. You can play with it as much as possible. It's not really permanent until you start sewing it into the tree, but even then, if you start working with it and you don't like it, undo it. Try it again. So here I am. I'm just going to thread the needle and then I'm going to start stitching it together. So I'm stitching the 2 ends together, and that's just to create sort of a continuous loop so it doesn't fall apart. So I'm stitching just through the loops and basically knotting it together. Sorry about the focus there. It doesn't like focusing when I'm stitching, but so I've attached all the ends together so it can't come apart. I'm lining it up with the tree, and now I'm going to take my thread and basically go through these loops. You can figure out whatever is easier for you. I usually start on one end and kind of work my way around. So I'm going through the first one here. I go through the loop, pull it tight, and then I'm going to go back through some of the loops of the chain. And the big thing here is to make sure it's attached at multiple points so that if it does pull, it doesn't pull on one singular chain. You kind of want to loop it through a bunch. To move over to the next loop of the tree branches, make sure you go through the loops of the chain. This hides your thread and stops singular threads from just kind of crisscrossing around. So you want to kind of go through the chain itself, zigzagging, like when you're weaving in ends in crochet. You just kind of want to hide your different threads. And then go through each of the loops so it's really secure to the tree. You can go through multiple times if you don't like the way it's sitting. I view it kind of like sculpting. You can shape the tree however you want by adding stitches here and there. Okay, and so you can see I have like that little part up there that wiggles, and I don't really like it, so I'm going to stitch through it and down back and kind of pull it. So this is the part where you can adjust. Keep your stitches sort of tight enough that it's not too floppy, but not so tight that your branches pull together, because the wire is quite malleable. So you can see I'm just kind of stitching little sections down. And I'm going to go back towards where my other long tail is. And by doing that, it means that I can just finish this off really easily by tying another granny knot with the two ends together. That's why we leave both of them long. You can cut one short and just work the one, but I find it a little harder to tie knots and then hide the ends, so you don't end up with a fluffy little part on the tree. So then I'm going to thread both of those tails onto the needle. The easiest way to do is to fold it around the needle. That gives you really tight bend in the ends, and then you can pull it through the eye. So I'm going to take both and kind of weave them back through into the center of the tree. And this is just to hide the tails when we cut them off. So I'm going to weave into the center, pull the needle through. I'm going to just pull the ends of the tails out, and then I'm going to pull it a little bit tighter so that I can snip it off and then pull the tree back, and it will hide the ends of the thread in the tree. And there we go. We now have our tree with our tree top attached to our grassy hill. And now for the best part, we're going to put our tree in our glass jar. So this part takes a little bit of getting used to. So I'm bending the plastic base here to kind of curve the edges up, and then I'm going to push it, and it should be kind of a firm fit. We don't want the tree to fall all the way through. This is why we kind of match the plastic to the base of the jar, and that means it's usually a tighter fit to go through that jar opening there, and you can see how it kind of sits in the top. And so then you just gently push it, and you might have to change where you're putting the pressure. You can see mine wasn't quite far enough, so I'm pushing on the edge there just to tilt it the other way, and then the lid fits right on. And there we go. There is our tree in a jar. And you can make all kinds of trees. Get creative, try different types of yarn, different wire. You can do different colors. I have pink trees. I have orange trees for autumn. I have ones that are really fluffy and scraggly looking. And if you want to make something bigger and you don't want to put it in a jar, then you can make really big trees too with, brass stems and pink leaves. Sky's the limit. Get creative and have fun. Hey, thanks for watching my first video. I'm still learning a lot, so if you have any feedback or questions, please let me know and I'd be happy to answer them.